Hi, welcome everybody. I'll give everyone a chance to connect to audio. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Great. So I'm Rebecca and I'm the communications person here at Round Sky. So thanks for attending our webinar today. And there's a few more people in the waiting room. Jamie, do you mind checking the waiting room as people come in? Great. Okay, thanks. So thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about confident cooperative facilitation. And you're in the right place if you're wanting to be able to facilitate and make progress while also being inclusive and cooperative with the people on your team, finding that balance. Collaboration can be really hard and it gets easier with skills and tools and patience and practice. And we believe that it's worth it. We know that it's worth it. And one thing that has always stayed in my mind as a client has told us that after working with us, they realized that they had this belief that people were just collaborative or they weren't. They had this kind of personality type, and that she realized after working with us that that wasn't true, and that tools can be really supportive to collaboration, that it's not just personality. And so we believe that collaboration is for everybody if they want it to be. And so many of you know us, but for those of you who don't or who are new to us or who want to get reacquainted, I would just want to share two quick things for you. So Round Sky is a remotely operated worker-owned co-op, which means we're a business where the workers own it together. And we believe that there are two main training opportunities when developing leadership and facilitation capacity. And we're combining the two, which is somewhat unique to us, I think. And first is that tools and processes that we teach under CoLab are really important, but even if our tools were perfect, I'm not saying they are, we still need number two, which is personal development to build self-awareness and emotional intelligence into our facilitation. So we bring tools and personal development together. And that leads me to the second thing I want you to know about us is we use this approach in our trainings and our courses as well. And we include a focus on both the hard skills and tools and the quote unquote soft skills and personal development. And our main strategic initiative of the year that's been for the last few years as well, that might be familiar to you, is the Cooperative Leadership Certification Program. And our students and clients have really helped shape this training. And together we've pinpointed some expansive starting points to build confidence and capacity really in cooperative facilitation. So you'll hear us reference some of the tools that we teach and some of the frameworks. So you'll kind of get a little sneak peek on that. And if what we're offering today resonates with you and how you'd like to approach your facilitation, consider applying. And applications are due this Friday, January 15th. And then you get an interview with me to see if it's the right fit. So it's not not your commitment, but just an informational space. So many of us are on Zoom these days more than we'd like to be, but I want to touch on some logistics before we get started for those who are less familiar. So the session is going to be recorded. It is right now and will be shared with you afterward. And feel free to put your questions and chat with each other and us in the chat box, which you'll find in the speaking bubble. Right now, it's probably at the top of your screen. Roll your mouse around and you'll find it. And we'll have time for questions at the end. And if you have any tech issues, feel free to message me directly or Jamie or Daniel, and we'll try to support you. And everyone is doing a great job, but please stay on mute unless we ask otherwise. And we have 1 hour to go through this material. So if you leave with questions, that's good. It means you're working with it, and we'll have our emails open as well to answer those if we don't get to all the questions. So with that, I want to give us some space to get to know who is here on the call. And so if you're willing, please use the chat box to tell us two things about yourself and say hello to people. So the first is your name, pronouns, and location, counting that as one thing. and also what your facilitation New Year's resolution or just a goal that you have right now. What's on your mind about how you want to improve? So put that in the chat box. And in case you're having trouble finding that, I'm just going to put a hello in there if I can find it. There it is. So it should pop up. So you can say your name, your pronouns and area, and what your facilitation goal is. It doesn't have to be your end all be all goal either. Don't worry. And welcome. And as you all do that, I'm going to further introduce myself. So I'm Rebecca. I currently live and have been in New Orleans for about 7 years. I'm originally from California, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today because facilitation skills and tools have come up in cooperative facilitation skills and tools have come up in so many contexts of my life. And sharing power is really important to me. And in the past, I've been in instances of doubt and uncertainty about my facilitation and if I found the right balance between being inclusive and making progress on our goals together. And some of the tools that I've learned at Round Sky in my time here, 4.5 years, have offered some really helpful frameworks for holding space for my team members and learning as we go, so not expecting perfection. And my facilitation resolution or goal is to be open to more joy in meetings and in the work, even when things are heavy. So now I'll pass it to Daniel to share a little bit about himself.
Well, I'm super excited you're all here today. Actually, I just wanted to say it's just such a moment of joy to see your faces popping up and more and more people needing to be admitted from the waiting room to get into the call and stuff. So thank you for being here. Yeah, I'm Daniel, pronouns he, him. I'm based in Northern Vermont in the United States. One of the co-founders of Round Sky, as well as a master integral coach and one of the instructors here at Round Sky as well. My passion is really helping people learn with somatic and mindfulness approaches to capacity building. And on a personal level, it's dance and connection to each other and in the natural world are like super important to me and passions of mine. This topic today of confident cooperative facilitation is really meaningful to me because frankly, I've often felt not very confident when I get up in front of a group. It's been a bit of it's been something I've been doing, most of my life. It's also been a struggle in a variety of ways. So I can get pretty anxious, feeling the flutter in my voice right now, as a matter of fact, right? And yeah, so it's challenging stepping into this role of facilitation sometimes. And yet over time, I have been finding ways to ground myself into more confidence. And the tools that we're going to touch on today are some of the things that have helped me with that. Yeah, my goal, I suppose, what was the name? Anyway, it doesn't matter. And my goal was something like to step into view with more ease, I guess would be one of my change goals. Thanks. And Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Daniel's saying. It's so great to see all of you and see your introductions. And Daniel and I actually have a lot in common in that we have. I'm also an integral master coach. We have a similar interest in somatics, and he's been really inspiring in that domain. For me, I have a background as a massage therapist as well, so I'm really interested again in that the connection between what's happening in our body and how we can show up and work with other people. And I'm from Randolph, Vermont, so I'm also it's the fourth rest area from the sun, for if you want landmarks. And but coming back to this theme of confidence, as I was thinking about this, what got going is I think a lot of us have met people who have unearned confidence in certain areas, which can either be fun or harmful depending on the context. And I think many of us have also met people who, even if they have a lot of capacity, have just heavy self-doubt or kind of speak to themselves in a harsh way. And the kind of confidence that I want to talk about here is confidence that's really based on measurable capacity. And as facilitators, that means our ability to show up and hold space for people, help them get where they need to go. And the one last thing I'll say about that is that that's a process. So that confidence that's based on being in a process that's moving us in a direction we want to move, rather than reaching some bar and having arrived somewhere. So thank you. It's great to see all of you here.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing, both of you, a little introduction, and everybody for introducing yourselves in the chat box. There's a theme of inclusivity I'm seeing. Somebody said, which really hit me, is how to navigate being a leader in an environment of terrible leadership. I think that's very timely, and at least in the US. And helping to, I saw a theme of allowing disagreement and seeing where you go from there. And I think these are big, important things that show up in our meetings that can possibly waver confidence in some ways, like not being able to know how to work with that. So thank you for bringing all of your goals and the things on your mind. And I want to continue this a little bit and hear more from you. So I want to hear a little bit about what do you think are some of the challenges you face in reaching that goal, or what's blocking you from that? And place it in the chat box if you already have what you understand that to be, but I'll share an example. So one of the challenges I see to getting confident facilitation is not knowing where your power or boundaries are as a facilitator. And sometimes that shows up in the loudest person being heard the most, and not having a lot of space for other people, or for power dynamics to show up and not knowing how to work with that, especially around personality, race, gender, class, and maybe the unchecked power dynamics that are not being said. And that can lead to conversations going in circles and circles without any satisfying or clear resolution, or unsure about where to go. So that's a challenge I see in getting confident facilitation in my experience. And feel free to put your challenges in the chat box as you're listening. And I want to pass it to Daniel if you have one to share.
Yeah, I was thinking about something that comes up a lot in the trainings is, we're teaching all these new skills, and people are like, how do we bring this to a group? How do I implement this, a new something with the group? How do I introduce that? And if there's not already a path for making changes, that can be quite challenging. And so I just wanted to call that out. How do we enroll people in that in a new way?
Yeah, that kind of highlights being a leader in an environment of terrible leadership. How do you bring new leadership skills, new healthy leadership skills in an environment where that's totally not the norm? You want to add something, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most challenging things that I've seen in meetings is when there's engagement that's expected and desired from people, and yet they can't find something meaningful in the content to connect with. And as a result, it's like people have to use a lot more effort to stay connected and to offer their creative feedback if they don't give input, if they're not invited to share what's meaningful to them.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thanks for that. And great comments in the chat box as well. I'm going to keep us moving. Feel free to share more. And I'm going to pass it off to Daniel so we can get grounded here, continue to get grounded.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, we wanted to give an opportunity to reflect on what confident cooperative facilitation means for each of us. And so I'll offer a few suggestions first about quieting our bodies and our minds. And if my suggestions work for you, that's great. If not, do whatever helps you just to feel more settled and resourceful in yourself. You might, for instance, soften your gaze. And I like to feel like where my body meets the earth in some way, like where my feet are touching the ground or my back on the chair. You might notice if there's any tension in your forehead or your shoulders, and just with a little breath out, letting that tension go. And breath, of course, is so important. We probably all know this already, but just this this idea of a longer exhale helps us to relax. And so just inviting a little longer attention to the exhale, maybe a little sigh or hum as we exhale. Feels good. I'm going to do that again. Yeah, this settling down, letting our bodies just relax, and we creates more space and more resource for ourselves. And with that, maybe we feel a little more grounded. I want to invite you to just reflect for a moment on what is confident facilitation for you? When you're at your best, you're working with others, what are you doing? What's that like? You can think of a time when you facilitated and cooperation and collaboration was working well, when a liberatory and healthy culture was emerging. What were you bringing to the moment that helped? And perhaps that's something you do a lot, or perhaps it's a stretch, doesn't matter. Either way, still take a moment just to consider, what does that look like for you? And from that, the sense of like, how would you like to build your own strength and capacity for confident facilitation? Are there some ways that you want to grow and change to enhance your abilities? And this may be similar to our check-in statement, or maybe a little more different, or another take on it. And when you're ready, just jot that down so you have a record of that. Just come back to the room and to yourself, and you can share it in the chat box, or scroll it on your journal and hold it up to the camera. But we'd love to share with each other what are some of the ideas that you all have about how you want to step into your own facilitation and in this cooperative and confident way.
There's an addition in the chat box of confident facilitation looks like me and my body breathing present.
Yeah.
Not letting my thought train get thrown off course by questions or strong personalities, opinions. Preparing myself and really preparing myself to listen and really hearing. Making room for a diverse discussion. Centering my facilitation in love and power, and lead from a legacy of Black genius, challenges white supremacy culture. Yep. Deep awareness and grace in the face of challenges, working on accepting responsibility for my power and use it to get work done. Be more present and laugh. Yes, thank you all for sharing those pieces, that like a little deeper reflection.
Another slice deeper.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks,
you.
Rebecca. Thank you all. Yeah, so please continue if you feel like continuing to jot your ideas in there, or reading the things that are going on in chat, please go ahead and do that. But now that we've got a sense of direction for ourselves, as we go through the tools that we're going to present through the rest of the day here, we want to invite you to consider, like, how do these tools that we're going to offer up, these tips that we have, how do they relate to what you're uniquely looking for in terms of moving your facilitation forward? That's and how can you take on something from this work that might be helpful to you, if it is. And so just invite you to consider that. And so let's get started with some of our suggestions for today. Our number one first suggestion, we've already been doing that a little bit, it's get connected with our body. You know, all of our work comes through this body that we move through the world, and we communicate with, and we facilitate with, and we, you know, it's all in a sense comes from here in some way. So how do we work with that? You know, we're talking about, you know, building up our somatic or bodily awareness, you know, having practices that enhance our own personal sense of alignment, enables us to facilitate with more groundedness and ease, as well as helping facilitate that for others when that's needed. So our bodies are a vast resource, and they've largely been ignored in our mainstream organizational culture, although I'm really happy to see that's beginning to shift. Mainstream culture prioritizes, you know, progress and degrees and such like that in order to achieve confidence. However, that's not the full picture. You know, we are our minds and our bodies. If you're familiar with Tema Okun's liberatory culture description, you'll see the ways that connecting inwardly is really important for ourselves and liberatory for organizational cultures. When we attend to somatic experience over time through practice, our facilitators notice that their capacity to navigate difficult, tense, charged situations with more capacity, resulting in more effective teams and more facilitator confidence. So we've included a focus on this in our cooperative leadership facilitation program because it's a valuable facilitation resource, you know, to rely on our body. When somatics are tapped into, it can bring us into a grounded confidence that's felt by the whole team. For example, when things got rather hot in a conversation, we're better able to listen or to respond appropriately rather than to get sucked in and react. We could sense when there's a tension in the room that's not been resolved. It gives us a direction of where to go next. One of our students found that focusing on their somatic practice enabled her to stop undermining myself, or at least to do it a lot less and start doing the hard things that I need to move my work in this world forward. So in developing our somatic abilities, I think of two parts: awareness of what's going on inside ourselves and deliberate practices to develop ourselves. The awareness part's kind of bodily mindfulness, paying attention to what's going on in ourselves and learning from ourselves over time. Like, oh, I'm feeling that fluttery feeling again. I wonder if I need to reassure myself that all is well. And over time, we get to know ourselves with greater nuance and acceptance. The practice part is about identifying ways we can regularly exercise certain capacities we want to build in ourselves. Like for myself, I've really been noticing that through paying attention to myself, that when I'm nervous, I kind of forget to breathe. Maybe I should do that now, actually. I've been experimenting with a few different breathing practices that, you know, to help me retrain my body and how it relates to stress, how I relate to stress through my body. And some other examples from students and clients are, you know, little practices like standing and feeling rooted on the ground for a few moments to build a sense of centeredness. Or conversely, like doing 3 jumping jacks really quick and feeling the tingling and the heart beating to feel into that sense of vitality and feel more alive. Or taking a few really deliberately slow breaths with a focus on that long exhale to feel more calmed. So I wanted to invite us all to begin to identify, like, what kind of somatic practice would you take up that would help you further enhance your confidence and in cooperative facilitation? So if you take a moment to reflect on the statement of how you want to learn and grow, and then ask yourself, what would help me feel more confident or grounded or more at ease with whatever it is in your own bodily experience? You know, what would help you in your body take steps towards being more resourced? What kind of little practice could you develop for yourself that would exercise the capacities of whatever it is that you need more of, whether it's, you know, feeling grounded or feeling more alive and awake or feeling more on point, or what, you know, whatever it is. Can you think of a way that doing something with your awareness and your body would help you practice that capacity, even when you weren't like standing up in front of a group and having to use it in the moment? So yeah, just take a minute, think that through for yourself, and as it starts to come to you, again, let's share that in the chat box and learn from each other, and have share ideas of different practices that could be related to our bodily awareness and our physical form and how we operate in the world. Yeah. This is great. So some of the things, extending my out breath, or drinking less coffee, even just, right, just simple things like dietary aspects of the body. I wasn't really talking so much about, but that's totally super vital. Yeah, well, this is some really good questions here too, like how the physical changes related to COVID and isolation, how do they impact the practices of somatic practices? Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, how do we make our Zoom meetings feel more connective, even if we're not in physical presence with each other? Maybe might be a question. How do we do that somatically? Could we all have a practice together, even that helps us feel more as if we were physically present, even though we're not? Or, I mean, there's so many ways to go with that, but I think that's a really good investigation. Yeah. Gestures. Yeah. Breathing, conscious breathing. Yeah, these are great.
Yeah,
go ahead, Rebecca.
I say these are great somatic practices that we can learn from each other, and I really like the one of taking a breath during a meeting. Like, if feeling like we're not getting anywhere or we're talking over each other, just asking everyone, like, can we take a breath? That is one that I particularly appreciate in our meetings. So thanks for sharing, everybody, and thanks, Daniel. And so I'll just kind of sum that up, that one of your next steps for yourself in building confidence is starting a regular practice of checking in with your body, however that looks like for you. And there's lots of ways. And it can be helpful to have an accountability practice set up. Maybe you meet someone in this call, or a meeting, a practice, or a course, but essentially you are what you need here. So however you can support yourself to make that happen is important. So to go to the next tip or understanding of how to build confidence is to add tools and processes for your whole team, how you facilitate your meetings, to your practice, to your leadership toolbox. So what we found is that getting workable, collaborative leadership for our team and ourselves can be really challenging. And part of that is this long history of autocratic leadership and normalized white supremacist culture that forms the basis of our teams in lots of ways, and how we think about power and leadership, and these ways of being run really deep in ways that often we can't yet see, or that we see and it's unclear about how to shift. So we're creating new ways of leading by being collaborative and being cooperative and working towards our values. So we're entering a terra incognita, or an unknown or unfamiliar territory. So in order to do this, not being confident is kind of expected in this sense. In order to do this, we need tools, we need ways of going about this. We need a map. And a good compass, perhaps, if you like that metaphor. And as we navigate participatory management, we really lean on tools to do this. So we found that having a practical understanding of how power works and where it flows forms a useful map for the territory of collaboration, and can help us build confidence in dealing with the complexity that shows up there. So we have a tool that we teach called the Power Matrix to navigate those dynamics. And these experiments really in practicing of facilitating cooperation and shared leadership can be particularly confusing, and there can be lots of conflict because everyone has a different idea about what shared power should look like, what it should feel like, what that should be for our team. So that adds another layer of complexity. It's new. It's new to teams in some ways in this setting. So in addition to the Power Matrix, in our leadership training that we mentioned earlier, we begin with integrating two tools that are relatively easy to add to your work. And they make pretty big differences to both our confidence and the team's effectiveness when facilitated fully, or even just pieces of it with skill. So those are called the living agenda, which includes a meeting practice that is a helpful tool for building facilitation confidence, that you're bringing in all the voices that are there and being really relevant. So Jamie will be discussing that a little bit more in a second through tension-driven meetings, because that's one of the steps within the standard meeting practice and within the living agenda. And another thing that we teach in our course is our collective decision-making process that supports teams' flows and decisions much better. It can be a helpful tool for holding a container of lots of different perspectives. And simply here, the tip is to just have a tool for decision-making and not depend on organic flow always for that. And we can answer questions about that more, but just want to offer that that's really important. And lastly, I'll share quickly that we also discuss accountability processes. One of the challenges with cooperation is figuring out how to get accountability and getting people to follow through. So that's a really important thing to put energy into and to think about for your team. How do you decide who's doing what, and what are the processes for accountability? So that's the overview of how the important things that we see of what tools and processes can be important for building confidence as a facilitator and for getting aligned and connected and making progress while staying human. So I encourage you to come back to this slide and look at how are the ways that you bring this into your own facilitation. But for now, we're going to zoom in, because we can't do all that today, but we're going to zoom into tension-driven meetings a bit with Jamie.
Yeah, so I mean, even tension-driven meetings and unpacking that can be quite a bit. But first, I just want to make a link to what Daniel talked about in terms of somatics and body-based processes, and connect it with this larger thing of a standard meeting practice, right? Which is that in order to really draw on those somatic capacities, they need to have a place to go, right? And part of having a standard meeting practice is that there can be a place in the way we do it. There are built-in places where people can connect to their somatic intelligence, somatic capacities, and bring those to the meeting. Likewise, with a tension-driven meeting, the idea is that we're creating a space for what's deeply meaningful to people to drive our agenda, to drive what we talk about. And when we talk about meetings in general, a lot of people think meetings are important, right? I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be a feature in many of our lives. But at the same time, I think most of us know people who hate meetings, right? Or maybe we're a person who doesn't like meetings very much. And why is that, right? That's a good question. What came up for me when I was thinking about it is that meetings can be like amplifiers. So if there's creative power and connection and capacity in the group, that can be enhanced and expressed when we're together. And likewise, if there are dysfunctions, there are disconnections, or we're not aligned in some way, that can also be amplified. And anyone who's been in a meeting where we're stuck, we're not getting somewhere, knows what that feels like. What we want to do, two things with a tension-driven meeting. One, we want to actually have it be based on what's deeply meaningful to the participants, so that they're plugged in. But at the same time, it's really important to have a process that moves those things forward, that shows us where do those different tensions that people are bringing up go, so that we don't get totally lost in a sea of what works, what doesn't work, and become rudderless, right? So before getting too much into the process, I just want to share how we define tensions, because even the word tension can be a little tension producing or a little loaded. And when I think of tension, I think of like an archer when they're pulling the bowstring back. Some of you may have heard me use this metaphor if you've seen me speak before, right? In that it's this force, some sort of creative drive to move something. And when that's preparing to move, we feel tension. It may be tension in the body of something wanting to be expressed. It may be tension in the room, but it's not really good or bad. It's just the impulse towards some kind of activity. And like with the bow and arrow, if we don't know where we're aiming that thing, it can cause problems, right? Or if we're just holding it, and there's no place to let go, we can get exhausted. And so a positive expression of tension is like when we're excited, right? We have something we really want to share. But if we've been feeling blocked, if we feel like there's no space to share what's meaningful to us, that's when we get these kind of tensions that show up as like interpersonal conflict or someone shutting down. And so there's this really important question here. How to make these tensions useful, how to point them in the right direction. And my stance is if we don't have a tool for metabolizing what comes up, it's going to be really hard when people are putting their tensions forward, right? There needs to be some way of processing those tensions. And this actually relates to this idea from permaculture, which is one of the principles that we build this training on, which is this idea of waste equals food. And basically what that's referring to is that in healthy ecosystems, there is generally no waste, right? What's waste for one being in that ecosystem is consumed and repurposed by the other beings. And so there's a composting process that happens. And it's worth noting that in this kind of Western industrial monoculture, there's this norm of flushing away or disposing of or hiding waste or things that we don't know what to do with. Right, so you take your trash out, and they take it somewhere where you don't have to look at it or deal with it, but it's still there somewhere. And in our organizational ecosystems, that can look like resentment. That can look like someone's idea that they're frustrated with, or some misalignment in strategy that we're just kind of like, nope, that's not relevant. And so if we don't have a way of circulating and repurposing this waste and turning it into fuel, then people who are bringing up tensions and no one knows where to put it, they tend to get labeled as like being problematic or difficult. And so we're looking for a way to change that, where it's really like you have some kind of creative input to offer this organization. And how do we, as a facilitator, how do I effectively support you in naming that and moving that forward? So our standard meeting practice, the idea is that's something designed to help facilitators and help participants in a meeting effectively flow through surfacing and processing tensions so that they can get the healthiest expressions of those tensions. Yeah, so, there are a lot of different advantages in this. We think that this is a kind of an optimal flow. And we do go through this process in depth in our facilitator training. And the training also gives people the opportunity to learn capacities to support people in moving through this process. And all of these areas are key, but we're going to be focusing on agenda building and specifically agenda processing, what's in this circle here. Basically, to build the agenda, and one of the values in building the agenda is that it's not just one person bringing their agenda to the table. That's not being handed to people. So the facilitator supports people in creating an agenda and putting it together. And then, how we go through this process is people name the items that are important to them. They have a chance to speak. And then the facilitator helps them sort those tensions based on what kind of process is going to help move it forward. And so everyone gets a chance to introduce their tension in about 10 seconds. And then either the team can vote on the order they want to deal with it, or the facilitator can move people through this. But there are a number of really important reasons to frame these things as tensions, as I mentioned. And one of them is that, again, it's not all on the facilitator when preparing a meeting to come up with the agenda, right? The facilitator is more about being present to people and helping them move through these things. The second thing is that it invites engagement, it invites people to show up with their humanness and what's actually alive for them. And the third piece is that it actually requires that you be engaged. If you want to get something out of this meeting, you need to show up and bring what actually matters to you, and speak to it. So, you know, again, we'll go over a little bit about how this is done. When we're building an agenda, right, we compile this and we have people name their tensions. But I want to say something that I think is really, really important here. And that is, it comes back to this piece of confidence, right? That you can say to people, hey, we really want your input. We really want what you have to share. But if you can't help people have confidence that what they share can be metabolized and processed and moved forward, right? If they have an experience of surfacing something and then getting shut down, or overwhelmed by all of these different tensions coming from all these different directions, then people will actually lose confidence in this process. So again, to set up, the facilitator will surface these tensions, we'll get them on the table, right? But once they're on the table, there's this question of, well, what do we do with them? And there are simple and really complex ways of dealing with them. And we teach this whole spectrum of tools in our facilitator training. But to begin with, I'm just going to name the simplest way of starting to work with these things, which we call the 3 Ps, or pattern, project, and person. And specifically what this means is that as a facilitator, part of what we do is help people identify the type of tension this is and what process is going to help it be moved forward. And so a pattern basically refers to something that's going to affect the whole team or the organization. It could be a business model, it could be a strategy, it could be some kind of policy or governance piece in the organization. But there's a specific process for that, integrative consent, because we need to integrate the opinions of the team members, because it doesn't just affect one person, it's a collective pattern. Project is concrete work that needs to be done. And so again, there's a different process that's going to be most useful for defining and assigning that work. It may not need to be a collective process in the exact same way. And then person is referring to some kind of interpersonal tension, like maybe there's been a conflict between people, or it could be a personal issue where like it's not like someone needs to make a spreadsheet, they need to learn how to make spreadsheets or get more comfortable with delivering on their work. That's work they need to do on themselves. And we don't have time to go in depth into this. You can certainly, we'll hopefully get you a copy of this so that you can start to look at these processes and learn more about them. But the main thing I want to illustrate here is if there's one tension that's about a pattern, right? Like we need a new strategy. And simultaneously, someone has a tension that is interpersonal, right? They're upset because someone said something harsh to them. And those things get put together. That's one of the places where people will get really stuck and will tend to lose confidence in themselves, in the process, in the work we're doing together, because they need different processes to move them forward. You're not going to resolve the interpersonal issue by fixing the strategy. And you're also not going to necessarily get a better strategy, even if you work things out with the other person. And so by being able to name those things and deal with them separately, you can really help people develop confidence that their tensions will actually be addressed safely and effectively.
Thanks, Jamie. I really like that last point, especially because one of the things that gets really complicated is all of these different tensions that are convoluted and hard to separate out. Like it's true that we can't fix both things with only one process always, or maybe even just one conversation. So getting at the specific tensions that people have and parsing those out is really helpful. And I'll just share a quick little story, or just a little something that might help you understand this better for yourself. So one of our past students had shared with me that they felt that this tension-driven meeting process really let the weight off their shoulders, because the tool helped them to depend on their team to bring the important questions alongside her, which was a big shift from their meetings being developed by just her, bringing all of the items, and then the team just showing up and letting her go through the process of what do you all think, and not getting that much, and really wanting them to step up, but not knowing how. So this kind of demanded to them that they showed up with her, and also helped her share leadership better, and created a workplace where people could actually bring those things that were coming up in their work that they weren't sure where to even bring. And to normalize that tension and conflict are not distractions from the work, but they're really important to making a better workplace and a better workflow, and everything feeling a little bit less tense in lots of ways. So just wanted to share that's part of what can happen here. So if that resonates with you, that's a good sign for yourself that you might want to try this. And I'm going to pass it to Daniel to share a little bit about the last framework that we're offering.
Great, thanks, Rebecca and Jamie. That was great. Yeah, the next thing is about going deep and wide. Not like when I think about all the tools that we offer, I think about like learning new skills and having more tools in my hands to be able to make the work happen. And yet there's also that something like what we're tuning into with the somatic awareness. There's something deep inside us. This is true on the personal and the organizational level. There's both the breadth of learning that's possible and the depth that we can go to. And I want to let's see. And I want to just say that it is this multifaceted journey, and that we can go both, deep and broad. And we think about this distinction that came up with this Harvard organizational person said, Ron Hafiz said, created this framework of technical and adaptive change, that there's these two different types of change processes that are necessary. And technical change can be this kind of change where we're learning new skills or instituting a new procedure. It can be followed, something that can be followed and effectively solve the problem. Something that can be solved by expertise and good management. For example, a technical change from attending our training would be to learn these tools, learn some tools that we've mentioned, like using tension-driven meetings in a meeting practice. That would be a technical change, that people could follow step by step what to do, follow a process, et cetera. And the facilitator could do that too. And, but however, adaptive change is when we or our organization needs to adapt and evolve and grow deeper in ourselves in some way in order for that change to take hold. This requires innovation, requires different kind of learning. It requires patience and persistence often, and expanding into growing into a new self, in a sense, growing into new capacities for the confidence that we desire. For example, using these ideas from above, you might discover that when you try to implement the technical change of learning a new meeting practice, that you're hesitant to suggest it to your team, or conversely, how to introduce something in a way that others will give it a shot without feeling imposed upon. So addressing these kinds of challenges would require adaptive change. It's a deeper kind of growth. It helps us build up our capacity to take risks and to suggest something new, or to learn to communicate well with others, to encourage them to try these new ideas. And these same principles are true whether we're talking about individual change or about organizational change. To be the democratic workplaces we aspire to and grow out of a long history of top-down leadership, both adaptive and technical changes are needed. To build facilitator confidence, we need to appreciate that both kinds of changes will need to take place. So we've designed this course that we're starting again soon to not only be about the tools and structures, but also about this interchange work of personal development and somatics. And together, these help us get to the heart of what it means to be a cooperative facilitator. It's more than tools, and it's about shifting how we use our influence in a deep, consistent, and caring way. Yeah. So with that.
Great. Yeah. I would love us to jump right into this and see what's landing for people. Oops, one more back. So I'm going to open some breakout rooms and would love for you to introduce yourself quickly and share your goal, something that's resonating with you. It could be what you mentioned earlier, and then share what kind of change, think about what kind of change you might need for this. Is it technical or adaptive? Is it both? And just share a little bit more about what that looks like for you. And you'll have about 2 minutes each, and I'll give you a switch time, but your goal and what kind of change that looks like for you. So I'm going to put you all in rooms, and then we'll come back in a few minutes and share how that went. You should get an invitation to join it. Great. And you should have an invitation to join a room if you're still here. Making sure everybody has a room.
Is there still someone here with us that we?
There is. Some people had some tech challenges, so moving them around. Okay, I think it's been a minute. Welcome back. I hope everyone was able to connect in your breakout room, that the technical universe worked out. Welcome back. And we have about 4 minutes, and I'd love to hear from folks about if anybody wants to share something that happened in their breakout room or something that is on their mind, that's welcome. And also we have some time for questions. So this will be just a reflections and questions time. So feel free to unmute or put it in the chat box. I'll look at both. So what's on your mind? Conrad, I see that you've unmuted and your box lit up. Would you like to share? If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Oh, no, I was, okay. Well, I had a great conversation with Shayna, very helpful. I think for me personally, I struggle with the imposter syndrome and knowing the material, but don't act in a confident way when I'm facilitating the material. So I'm hoping that eventually hopefully be a part of this class for the next 10 weeks, I can build that confidence up that when I walk in a room, I'm walking with confidence, but also in a way that I can capture the material and make it richer for my students. So
I definitely resonate with the imposter syndrome, and
Mhm.
there is something to be said about being fully prepared and still having this kind of imposter syndrome
Right.
that shows up. And
Right.
thanks for sharing that.
I enjoyed the portion where you all was talking about the adaptive, growing deeper within yourself. And I really feel like that's something that, you know, we need to develop. You know, so many times you kind of get stuck in one particular way of doing things, or letting certain people just have the authority, where, you know, I feel like we're all in this together, trying to build, trying to grow, trying to, whatever it is that we're working toward. You know, in my particular circumstance, we're working toward trying to build a co-op grocery store here in Louisville, Kentucky. And so it takes everybody together, working together to develop this, and to be aware that everybody has a say in what's going on and what needs to be done. And so I think that that will be a very, very important part of learning, of awareness, that you know, we need to have confidence in ourselves and know that everybody has something special to bring to the table, so to speak. Everybody has a voice or a say in what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think I agree. And I think there's something about the adaptive change that we're asking of communities when we build a co-op, especially like a food co-op, to trust like that. I think that's an adaptive change. And to show up that we're asking of others. Thanks for sharing. And Daniel and Jamie, if you have things you wanna, I'm going like this because you're on both sides of the screen for me. If you'd like to offer anything up, also that's welcome. And we have some time for maybe a question or two or another comment if folks wanna jump in.
Yeah, I'll just quickly name something that came up from the conversation in our breakout room, which is just in all this talk about change and improvement and progress, especially with adaptive change, it's so important to be able to meet people and organizations where they are, right? And accepting exactly what's going on, especially as you start to shine a light on some of this stuff. And it may be that things have been building for a long time. So by the time you actually face them, it's like, this is totally overwhelming, right? There's a lot of heat or intensity here, and that can't be bypassed, right? So having the tools to actually acknowledge and validate that is in some ways just as valuable as having tools for starting to change it.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I don't really have anything particular to add, but I'm so curious about who you all are and what you're up to, and you know, hope we get the chance to have more conversations. And you know, I think I, for one, could stay on a few extra minutes if, you know, we're going to wrap up now in terms of our official time. But if folks do have some more questions, things like that, and want to stay a little longer, then please just stay on the line after we do our formal closing, and we can get into a few more questions or conversations for a few minutes.
Yeah, we can have our official close, which is just a big thank you to all of you for spending time on Zoom and being present. I think we demanded a lot of presence from you, which maybe is not normal in webinars. So thanks for being here. And I'll put that link in the chat. But thank you for being here. And you have my email because I've been emailing you. So feel free to respond to that. And I'm happy to answer questions and see where we can support you or connect you to people who can with your specific challenges and goals. So thanks for being here. And I'll stay on too. And I think Jamie might have to jump, but Jamie, if you don't, obviously you're welcome to stay. And thanks for being here, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Nice.
I see a few folks are still here. Are there some questions or comments that that are on your mind?
If you're having trouble unmuting, I can help you also.
I was just curious in terms of your method for collaborative. It sounds like some sort of method for collaborative decision making. I'm curious where I can get more information about that.
Yeah, good question. And we have a cooperative decision making toolkit on our website if you wanted to dive in, like if you wanted to get a taster. But it's a consent based decision making method, which is similar to consensus, but just a little different. It's arguably very similar, and some people use consensus in a very similar way, but it's a way of proposing a decision based on a tension that came up, which is a little bit different. So one person brings their tension and proposes a solution to what they're seeing as that tension between the arrow, that how they want to change, where they want to direct the organization. And then it's around what can we try for now that won't cause harm. And that's to us to challenge our values, to our community, to our organization. That we encourage people to define harm in ways so that there is a really a good understanding, but it's a quick taste of what the collective decision-making model is. We call it integrative consent.
Okay. And are you going to send out any these things that you shared with us? The slides or I think they were slides.
Yep, I can share out the slideshow, and the recording as well will be in the email probably in the next 2 days.
No problem. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thanks for being here.
So I think that answers Catherine's question about a recording. Yes, there will be a recording you can share with people. I'm actually going to put it on our website so you can share that with folks, that link. Nice. Thanks for being here from Australia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining. Jen, did you have a question?
I did. So I think in an ideal world, your whole organization would be working with this platform and these tools. And I presume that for most of us who participate, that's not the case. So I know that you can't give me all of the strategies in the next 30 seconds to how to, as one being going into an organization and trying to embody these skills, but sort of a sense of how other people have parlayed that into their own work so that it's meaningful and you don't feel like I have all these tools, but nobody's listening because they want to do it the old patriarchal way.
I can weigh in on that if that's useful.
Yeah.
One thing we try to weave into the training and support you in doing your own work and is what we call guerrilla tactics or implicit techniques. So we want to teach you the whole system because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And you can have a sense and have experience of the coherence there. But at the same time, and it's been the case for me too, there are environments where maybe there's only one tiny piece that people are actually open to right then. And so what we try to support people in is finding what that piece might be. Like where is the openness in the organization? Where's the pain in the organization, right? And also where do you have leverage in your role, right, to introduce something? And based on those factors, you can sort of decide what piece to start with, right? And have some way of measuring like, hey, look, we got noticeably more effective when we did this thing. And you know what? If there's actually this other thing that we could do, which can maybe make us even more effective, and sort of use that as a way to flesh this out. And that can also help you decide how explicit or implicit to be, right? About like coming in and saying, hey, why don't I just do this for you, right? And then you take that and they're like, wow, you got that done really quickly, or wow, you actually help that person be accountable. They're always avoiding what they need to do. And then you can say, oh, cool, well, that's this thing. Or maybe you just introduce the process if you have the leverage to do that. But there's a lot of exploration of that and the tools and how to define all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to add something, Daniel?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I was just going to reiterate. Yeah, it's just like, it's just about like finding what you do, what you can do, you know, and trying to identify that. And, you know, regardless of learning collab, it's hard work, but that's the work, you know, you know, what can you do? What even small or big, you know, what is it possible? What seems possible here to try?
I guess that leads me into my next question. So it's a 12-week training course, correct? 10 week. Okay. So you have the 10 weeks, you have a foundation here for yourself, and then you're back in your bubble. So what sorts of avenues are available for folks to continue with either their classmates or, you know, the course facilitators to stay in the conversation so it's fresh and there's a place to ground back into that versus looking at a mountain onto your own?
Well, one way that I've seen some of it's organic. So one way today that I saw some people in the work in this webinar have been in our course. And so jumping back in, getting a refresh in a very like kind of non-committal way. And then we've also worked with some individuals have had the leverage within their organization to do a customized training specific to them and their challenges. So they've hired us and had them work with their organization to train everybody and help them through the personal development challenges that they're having. And there's also another course that people can take that want to go deeper into we have like a strategy conversation, a personal development conversation, different ways of processing tensions. So people have sometimes decided to keep going into what we call level 2, but it's just another layer of how this fits. So there's lots of ways, and we're a tiny cooperative. And so there's a lot of space for people who work with us to say, I really want this. And they like actually have quite a bit of weight because we're a high touch, I think is the word, a high touch organization. So if you have ideas, we're also open to that. So that's kind of one of the benefits of working with a small organization. Maybe I missed something though. I see you look ready to say something, Daniel.
Well, yeah, I just would say that the relationships that develop over the 10 weeks amongst participants can also be quite supportive, and people have been in communication with each other during and after the course to a degree. How much, I'm not sure. We at one point thought, oh, we need to have a community practice, like an ongoing group that we can kind of keep checking in with each other. And I think at a certain point we would try that again because we really like that idea. And I think that could be very important, but currently we're not offering that because there just wasn't enough demand, you know, not enough kind of like critical mass of interest in that. But I would hope that comes back, for instance. So I don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add a couple of quick things to that too. One, I'm definitely seeing, to echo that, in the groups, there are like these deep connections that are forming between people that people are really enthusiastic to continue. So I think that's going to grow, and I think we hope to offer more avenues, even if it's just reminders of people for people to connect who said they wanted to connect. But another thing that I think is worth naming is that the way this training is set up, well, two things. One, what I tell people in the course is that they don't need to have memorized all these tools, but by the end of it, I want them to be familiar with them and to know exactly where to find them, right? So if they want to sharpen their skills around a certain tool, they don't have to dig through stuff, right? Those links, those places are really clear. The other thing is the way that we set up this training, the adaptive element of it, is that we want people to find a team that they start to implement this stuff with, and we encourage them to make that a team that will best suit their learning. So for some people, it is this work environment where there are big changes that need to happen. But for other people, it's just a few people at that work environment. For other people, it's in their household, right? Like with their roommates, because you can apply this in so many different ways. And so we support you in learning what's going to support your learning. And then the learning setup, like we give you some information, we make sure you're familiar with it in your own language, and then you try it, and then you come back and go over it again. And that makes it a lot less likely that it'll just be some info dump that leaves your head when you're done. You'll have experience and hopefully people you can continue working with after the course.
Thank you.
Nice. Did you have other questions or curiosities?
I think that's it for now. I had shared with Jamie in our breakout that I had done a breakout session with, I think it was Cecile, almost 2 years ago. And so this has been in the back of my head for a while. And that class had really resonated with me because it talked about the places where people have autonomy and places where people don't, and where those gray areas are. And I've just been thinking about how that would so serve so many work environments that I've been in since then, and have just really been wanting to find that skill set and learn those tools. So I'm going to go check it out.
Great. Well, definitely apply. It sounds like it's on your mind. And then you and I would have a longer conversation, and the cohorts are pretty intimate. So the goal of the interview is to make sure it's a good fit, basically. So know that we could talk about it and see if it really does feel like a good fit for you. And although you've been thinking about it for 2 years, in some ways, you already know what you would be getting into, and it's just about what works for you and what feels right.
Yeah. Do you, when do you plan to have those conversations?
The interviews, when you apply, you get my Calendly link, so to my calendar, and then you pick a time between now and I think February 5th. And then the courses start February 15th. So that gives you some time between your interview and the start of the course to prepare and decide your final answer for this session. Yeah.
Sounds great. All right. Well,
thank you for the great questions and for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. This is a lot of attention for a webinar. I feel very honored.
Good.
All right.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Be well, everyone.
Bye.